You know, some of the world's most complex problems have these deep, tangled, and honestly, often tragic histories. Today, we're going to try and unravel one of them, a story of promises, partitions, and a peace that seemed so close you could almost touch it, and then it just slipped away. Okay, let's dive in. And our story really kicks off in a year that could have been the end of the conflict. The year is 1993, and there was this moment of incredible, almost unbelievable optimism in the air.
I mean, think about it. After decades of violence, bloodshed, and just total mistrust, it really seemed like the impossible was happening. You had leaders from both sides shaking hands on the White House lawn. There's this genuine feeling that finally, Israelis and Palestinians were about to find a way to live together, side by side, in peace.
And that is the huge question, isn't it? That's what this whole explainer is about. To find the answer, we've got to go back. And, I mean, way back. Not just a few decades, but centuries, to really understand the forces that brought everyone to that moment of hope and the ones that just tore it all apart.
So yeah, the modern conflict is just over a century old, but the connections both peoples have to this land, they go back thousands of years. But to understand the political stuff happening today, the forces that really shaped the modern state of Israel, we need to look at Europe in the 1800s.
For centuries, Jewish people all across Europe were this persecuted minority. They faced constant religious and ethnic hatred, these violent massacres called pogroms, all kinds of baseless rumors. And after generations of living like that, a really powerful idea started to take hold, that the only way for Jewish people to ever be truly safe was to have a country of their own.
This idea didn't just stay an idea. It grew into a full-blown political movement called Zionism. And the goal was pretty clear, to establish a national homeland for the Jewish people right in their ancestral land, the area that was then known as Palestine. This sparked the first big waves of Jewish migration to the region, which, at the time, was part of the Ottoman Empire and had a majority Arab population. Okay, now here is where things get really messy, and you can see the seeds of future conflict being planted. During World War I, Britain made two promises that were completely contradictory. In 1915, they promised Arab leaders their own unified state if they helped fight the Ottomans. But then, just 2 years later, they also promised the Zionist movement they'd support a Jewish national home in Palestine. So when the war ends, the Ottoman Empire is gone, and Britain is suddenly in charge of a region where they'd basically promised the same piece of land to two different groups. After World War II and the absolute horror of the Holocaust, the pressure to find some kind of solution became unbearable. Jewish refugees from Europe were pouring into Palestine, and both Jewish and Palestinian nationalist movements were getting stronger and stronger. The whole situation was just explosive. The British were completely overwhelmed. They couldn't manage the escalating violence, so they essentially just washed their hands of the whole problem. They passed it over to the brand new United Nations and basically said, you guys figure out what to do with Palestine.
So the UN came up with what seemed like a logical solution on paper, a partition plan. As you can see here, they proposed splitting the land into two states. They allocated about 57% for a Jewish state and 43% for an Arab state.
And what about the city at the heart of it all? Jerusalem. It's holy to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. So it was considered so special that the UN planned for it to be an international city, not belonging to either state, but run by the UN itself.
Right, so this is the crucial moment. How did people react? Well, Jewish leaders, while they weren't thrilled with every single detail, they accepted the compromise. They were ready to create their state. But the surrounding Arab nations, they rejected it completely. They saw it as just more European colonial powers drawing lines on a map, giving away land that wasn't theirs to give. And so, the very day the British left in 1948, Israel declared its independence, and 5 Arab armies immediately invaded.
That first war in 1948, it was just the beginning. The next few decades were defined by a series of conflicts that didn't just cause immense suffering, they completely redrew the map of the entire region.
And you can see the results right here. In 1948, the brand new state of Israel, against all odds, actually won, and it expanded its territory beyond what the UN had planned. The rest of the land that was meant for a Palestinian state, it was taken over by its neighbors. Egypt took control of this little coastal area called the Gaza Strip, and Jordan took the territory known as the West Bank. Fast forward to 1967, another war explodes. This time, in a really stunning victory, Israel captures both the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, which put millions of Palestinians under military occupation.
But behind all these maps and dates, there was a staggering human cost.
In that first war in 1948, over 700,000 Palestinians either fled or were forced from their homes in the land that became Israel. To Palestinians, this event is known as the Nakba, which means the catastrophe, and it created a refugee crisis that is still unresolved to this very day.
After the 1967 war, a new and really deeply contentious chapter began. The Israeli government started to support its citizens in building settlements. We're talking entire towns and communities inside the occupied West Bank. Now, much of the world considers these settlements illegal under international law, but for decades, they've just kept on expanding.
And that brings us full circle, all the way back to the early 1990s. The situation seemed pretty hopeless. But then, a leader emerged in Israel who decided to do what many thought was unthinkable: negotiate with his enemy.
That leader was Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. He realized that the way things were going was unsustainable, and he started secret talks with the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO. This led directly to that moment of hope we started with, the 1993 Oslo Accords.
The Oslo Accords were a massive breakthrough. For the first time ever, the two sides officially recognized each other. The PLO renounced terrorism and accepted Israel's right to exist, and in return, Israel recognized the PLO as the representative of the Palestinian people. Critically, they created a framework for a Palestinian government. And as a temporary step, they divided the West Bank into 3 zones: Area A under full Palestinian control, Area B under joint control, and Area C under full Israeli control. This whole complex setup was meant to be temporary, a pathway to a final peace treaty.
But just as hope was at its absolute peak, extremists on both sides mobilized to destroy it. Palestinian militant groups like Hamas, who rejected any peace with Israel, launched this horrific wave of suicide bombings to sabotage the whole process. And then the ultimate tragedy. In 1995, an Israeli right-wing extremist, furious that his own leader was giving away land, assassinated Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Just like that, peace had lost its champion.
In the years that followed, all that optimism from Oslo, it just faded. It was replaced by cynicism, by violence. The peace process totally collapsed, and the situation on the ground became even more complicated.
And the divisions weren't just between Israelis and Palestinians anymore. Now, they were inside the Palestinian movement itself. In 2007, a short but brutal civil war broke out between the militant group Hamas and the more moderate Fatah party. The result? A fractured leadership. Hamas took complete control of Gaza, while the Fatah-led Palestinian Authority was left in charge of parts of the West Bank.
And this is the reality today. The West Bank isn't some solid block of territory. It's this incredibly complex and fragmented map, a patchwork of Palestinian towns, mostly in what became those areas A and B, all interspersed with hundreds of Israeli settlements and the roads connecting them in Area C. It's all under varying degrees of Israeli military control. That temporary division from Oslo, it became a permanent reality. And this fragmentation is maybe the single biggest obstacle to creating a viable, independent Palestinian state.
Which leaves us with the agonizing question that has just haunted this land for decades. When the map itself looks like a puzzle with disconnected pieces, how can final borders ever be drawn? When the issue of Palestinian refugees is still unresolved and the status of Jerusalem is so fiercely contested, what does a solution even look like? With all the trust shattered and the hope of 1993 now just a distant memory, what is the path forward?